And this week's How Do I is how do I write a compelling backstory for my RPG character?
Mm.
Hmm.
So I've been playing D&D for many a moon now at this point, and I have seen players that have had excellent backstories, and I have seen players that have a sentence, and that is the whole of their character.
Mhm.
Now, I will preface that depending on the setting, you may not want to get invested enough to have more than a sentence, especially with, say, the botched guys who their characters die quite often.
I
And
was
so
gonna say, botch guys, you got like 2 words.
yeah, and so but if it's a character that you think you're gonna have for a while, how do you go about writing a compelling backstory for that character?
I typically just fly by the seat of my pants when it comes to writing a backstory. I let it occur organically in the game. Like I have a rough idea, like a sentence or two, but then it gets fleshed out the more I get to know this character.
Mm. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Usually it's if I start with character, it's like, okay, what's the character concept? And I usually dictate that by whatever race I pick, whatever class I pick, and then kind of try to figure out what do they want? What's their end goal, if you will, if they have one. But I also kind of realized that kind of backfired a little bit. Because I was playing in a very long, I don't play with this group anymore, but we were playing in like a 3-year long campaign. And, I kind of had to abandon my first character because they got everything they wanted. They kind of got their happy ending, if you will. So it was like,
It was logical to let them move on and retire from adventuring.
Kind of, yeah, because it was just like, yeah, they're the whole character he was a child when his family was kicked. It was a Goliath, so his family was kicked out of their tribe, and he was left to train with monks, and then his parents were killed. So, it was very much his whole theme was like finding a home and everything like that. And he found that. He found a tribe of Goliaths that accepted him and, found a wife and everything like that. And it was just kind of like, I've got nothing else for this character to do. Like, he's not going to he's not adventuring because he has the thrill of adventure. He's adventuring because, this is what his path has taken him on.
Well, and you provided plot hooks for your DM in that character backstory to fulfill his goals.
Yeah, and I always try to do that, or at least try to because a D&D campaign should be interactive storytelling.
Yeah.
Not always is, but it should be, in my opinion, it should be, unless you're just playing a silly one shot with friends or something.
Yep.
If I'm playing in a campaign, then yeah, I got to have a core of like what this character wants. So
yeah, I remember with my I mean, at this point I'm a forever DM, so I've only had a few actual characters. But with my first character, I went to the DM. I said, okay, what's the setting? Where are we starting out? And are there any extenuating circumstances? And so I made sure to write my character in such a way that there's a reason for him to be where the campaign starts. There's a reason for him to be joining the adventure. And so with that skeletal outline, I went ahead and wrote up a backstory that fleshed out my character for myself. And it, it ended up being about 5 pages long.
Oh yeah.
Most of that is for myself, but I gave that to my DM along with a more summary that was about a paragraph long of what of the gist of what my DM would need to know.
Yeah.
And then I also gave him the long version if he wanted to read it, great. If not, it was there more for me to get into the mindset of my character.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up that you talked to your DM first, because I definitely didn't do that the first game I was in.
Neither did I.
And unfortunately, I kind of felt like my character got lost in the group because of that. I don't think the DM and I were really on the same page of what we were trying to do there. The second group, I had more of that. So, group dynamics will define that too.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I would definitely caution people when they're writing their character backstory is realize what level your character is and what feats are actually possible.
Yeah.
And also don't try to shoehorn in some equipment that your character as whatever level couldn't realistically have. Oh, I've got this mythical sword from my father.
That's a +5 and yada 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 yada.
Because all that's going to do is it's going to cause strife, and realistically as a DM, the best outcome of that would be like, yeah, your father only told you that was a +5 sword because he was boasting, and it's a complete exaggeration. That's actually just a normal sword that looks very decorative or something like that. Like, and then which that's what you got to do.
Well, and that's one of those, like, if you play that right, you can both have a satisfying ending. But if you just play, write yourself as the invincible hero, you're going to be very disappointed.
Yep. Unless you were once the invincible hero and something happened that brought you back down to level 1.
Well, okay.
Power.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say, like, don't write your character as the shonen protag.
Yes.
Don't do that. You're not the protagonist. Like, you're not the invincible hero that will overcome everything. Especially if you're playing with a group of people, you gotta, and like Joe said, I think having at least an outline of what your character's likes, dislikes, sort of thing in there is what's going to help you play well with others, because you got to play with everyone at the table. It's not just you and the DM.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what's, in our campaign, my character is a Goliath. Another character was a deep gnome, and another character, and this is a homebrew setup. And another character was like a fey creature. So it's like, okay, what's our, how is my character going to react to them? And, what's his opinion going to be on that? Versus, you got to think of these, that's one of those things you got to think about and take into consideration with the setting the DM gives you.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it boils down to communication, really. Communicating with your DM, communicating with the other players, having realistic expectations for it, and then having fun with it.
And have flaws.
Yes. Actually, my first character, one of his flaws was he was suffering from PTSD from a fire, because his wife had been killed in a fire and he was unable to save her. And so there were a couple of times where the enemies used fire magic, and I asked my DM if I could have there's some rules for insanity checks or something like that, and we kind of shoehorned that into and so there were a couple of fights where my character for the first several turns didn't do anything because of fire. Yeah. And another thing is, don't be afraid to reflavor stuff that doesn't necessarily change the mechanics of a character, but reflavoring it to fit whatever backstory you want, given you have the DM's permission. So, you know, a random fighter, there's no reason why it couldn't be a samurai, you know, something a bit reflavored, but it has the same mechanics as what's there.
Well, and if you're not playing a subclass samurai, but you're just playing a fighter that
Yeah,
maybe
because it
acts
also
as a
depends on
samurai.
which version you're playing. Because yeah, some actually do have samurai. But yeah, but if the version that you're playing doesn't have a specific niche, that there's ways that you can definitely facilitate the feel of that without actually changing any of the mechanics.
Well, and definitely keep in mind what the people around, you know, again, if it's a group you don't know, you know, you may want to back things off a little bit until you kind of get the general group vibe. But if it's people that you do know, and I played in a one shot, I think it was like 2 years ago with it was actually on the Dragon Con stream with a bunch of friends from the digital media track. So I created a Kenku thief whose name was Meme.
And he only spoke in memes.
And he only, well, not only he only spoke in memes, I triggered the memes with my keyboard.
Nice.
And that was a lot of stress of the preparation aside. That was a lot of fun, but I couldn't bring that into a home game. I can't bring my whole computer set up and keyboard set up to do that, you know. But
yep.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing a silly one shot, then lean into the silly.
Yep. I think my last tidbit of advice is before starting on your character, talk to the DM about what races and classes are even available, because the DM has full discretion on what's available. So you may be a huge fan of Critical Role, but you can't play a gunslinger in this specific campaign because, well, guns don't exist. So yeah, just talk to your DM and find out what your options are before getting so far down the rabbit hole that you're already in love with this character just to find out that it doesn't fit within the campaign.
Yeah, and you know, and there's nothing to say you can't build a bunch of quote pre-made characters. I know a lot of people do that because honestly, character building is fun.